When it comes to manga, there are two demographics that, for the most part, run the majority of the sales and popularity of the medium, and those two are shonen and seinen. There's been an age-long debate going on about whether these two are the same, whether they're different, which is better, which is worse, what's better about them, what's not, and it's just been a war going on between shonen enjoyers and seinen enjoyers as to which one is the better demographic. Now, the shonen boys will claim that it's the best because it gets more sales and has better, cooler moments, and the seinen men will claim it's better because it has character development and is realistic. Now, I don't know about you, but I think that they're both kind of shit, and isekai is honestly just the best. But when it comes to discussing and debating between seinen and shonen manga, I think there are a lot of variables that people don't really take into account and simply just say shonen is for younger kids and seinen is for older dudes, when for the most part that isn't really the case. I know when you translate it over to English, it literally means that, but I don't really think Chainsaw Man is meant to be directed towards young boys, and there may be some seinen series out there that aren't that appealing to certain adults. Like, it's a very blurry line between the two demographics, which is the main reason I don't think the argument for one being better or worse, or one being this style and one being the other, is very valid, to be quite honest. Now, if we're talking a few years ago, then maybe we could have somewhat of a valid debate as to which is better for what reason, but now it kind of seems like the line between these two demographics is being blurred, at least in the definition that we've had it in for the longest time. Series like Chainsaw Man and Hell's Paradise are coming out of the woodwork and revolutionizing what it is to be a shonen series. It seems like anime in general is shifting towards less generic and childlike storylines as they were in the past with the big three and series of that nature. But honestly, who knows? This kind of stuff may be for young boys at this point. In this day and age, man, anything is on the internet and younger guys are looking at who knows what. This shift in shonen media could be because of how repetitive the hero storylines have become in the last few years, or even since the beginning of manga in general. When you think of an anime protagonist, you usually think of like Naruto or Luffy, characters who set goals for themselves and are kind of the heroic protagonist, but that's a very vague understanding of the whole medium. In fact, I'd say nowadays there's more of the anti-heroic main character than there is of the heroic one, and that's again because it seems as though they're taking more of a shift towards the darker themes and storytelling that goes for both shonen and seinen storytelling. Because again, if we're comparing them for what target audience they're going after, if we're basing it off of simply the gore and the violence, it's very difficult to depict between the two of them if we're specifically talking about the violence and the nature of the story. But there are some things that do separate these two series to this day, and that's kind of what I want to highlight in this video because I don't hear many people talking about that. The main focus just seems to be shonen is childlike and seinen is adult-like, and that could not be farther from the truth. Now, because young dudes in this modern day seem to be more attracted to darker themes and storytelling, you don't really see guys in like high school and stuff into like Naruto and things like that. Maybe the first few anime it's cool, but if we're really talking favorites, it's usually stories like Attack on Titan, Chainsaw Man, those kinds of stories that are shonen in nature but have darker elements to them, which is why they've gained so much popularity, especially over the past few years. And it's kind of the reason why they're revolutionizing anime and manga. Now, at this point, what separates these two demographics? If the line is so blurred between them and they're both pretty violent in nature, what is it that separates these two? I do think it's in the style of writing more so than it is the violence and gore, as I mentioned before. I think shonen tend to have faster paced stories with more ambitious protagonists, and this doesn't just mean the old shonen structure of having a character with a dream and them going after it for the whole story. By faster pace, I'm talking, let's take, I guess, Attack on Titan's pacing. The pacing is very quick, a lot of things happen in a very short amount of time, and the main character Eren, whilst not being quite the generic protagonist we're used to seeing in shonen, or at least previous shonen, he still has goals of his own, and he's still an ambitious protagonist, which fits very well into the modern shonen demographic. If you take Light Yagami from Death Note, which is in fact a series that was published around the time where shonen was still kind of, you know, the classic shonen, he's a character with ambition, but Death Note is also a very fast-paced story, being a murder mystery thriller type story. Now, when we contrast this with seinen, the biggest difference becomes the slow and detailed pacing of seinen stories, which is why some people unfortunately find Vagabond, Vinland Saga, and some even Berserk boring at certain parts. Because of the slow pacing, more attention to detail is paid to the characters, and certain moments in the story are further embellished. This doesn't mean that seinen moments are better than shonen moments, or that seinen main characters are better than shonen main characters. You may think that, it may be the case for specific characters, but I wouldn't really base that off the demographic alone. I'd just say that's phenomenal writing. Like, if Guts wasn't a shonen series, I still think he would be my favorite protagonist. I still think he would be in the conversation for the best protagonist in the medium of anime and manga. The main focus for shonen, to me at least, is to invoke excitement and thrill in the reader, whereas for seinen the goal really seems to be to enlighten the reader on the deeper meaning of the story and to teach the reader different adult lessons that are important to later on in life. And we see these through the characters and the expression of more subtle emotions. It's not something extremely exciting, though it can be at certain parts. It's more so a realistic, tragic, more than it is full of exciting moments. Historical stories are also in most cases classified as seinen, and I think this is why a story like Kingdom, which would generally be classified as shonen based on the main character and the plot and how things really carry out throughout the story, but at the same time it's a seinen, maybe because it's historical. But to be fair, it does have some adult themes, which I guess is why they lean towards seinen on that part. Again, there's some things that cross the line. Not everything is on one side. Not every seinen has to be bloody, gory, and about death. And not every shonen has to be about your favorite main character becoming Hokage. So if we were to take an example like Chainsaw Man, which is a shonen by the way, I don't know. If we were to take Chainsaw Man, make it more philosophical and less comedic, you'd probably have a seinen series because it has those elements to it already. It's not entirely about the explicit content. That's a very important thing to keep in mind. Now, I'm just saying that for the most part, this is how these stories are in contrast with one another, barring certain aspects, of course. Some have certain aspects over others. Some shonen have a lot more seinen themes and some seinen have a lot more shonen themes. That's just the way it works. You can definitely say that a shonen has better writing than a seinen, or that a seinen has a louder and more annoying protagonist than a shonen. These are just misconceptions made by Twitter enthusiasts and Discord moderators at the end of the day, so I wouldn't be one to take their opinion seriously. For some reason, people make it seem like shonen doesn't have good characters compared to seinen. I understand where you're coming from because Guts and Musashi are quite literally unrivaled. To be honest though, I'm not surprised at this opinion coming from the same people who think shonen is for kids. Yes, because seinen tends to flesh out their protagonists and characters in general much more than shonen anime, it does mean that at times, in most cases, seinen will have the better written quote-unquote main character. But that doesn't mean one is better than the other, especially when we consider the cast. In seinen, it really just seems to be one character or two characters that are the big focus and they get the most amount of development. Seldom do you see a seinen series focus on the entire cast in equal regard, because of course it's extremely difficult to focus on every character in the same way and it takes away from the main characters who have been developed to such an extreme degree. Whereas if you take a look at a shonen series, it seems as though the entire cast is favored and the entire cast is given a wide variety of appealing traits that make their character enjoyable to the reader or watcher. The only real difference between shonen and seinen character writing is about how they impact and resonate with the reader. If you consider again that a shonen character may experience shonen things and shonen troubles, and a seinen character may experience seinen things and seinen problems, then it just makes a lot of sense how these two different characters and the two different demographics affect the two different age groups that are typically viewing these series. If you take Denji for example, who really just wants to get laid for the most part, and you compare it to that of Punpun, who goes through some like real traumatic shit, then you can kind of see the contrast between the two. Denji resembling the typical younger boy, and Punpun, while being young for the majority of the story, dives into many adult themes that can be quite explicit to young children and may honestly just go over their head. Again, authors do tend to cross the line sometimes. Do you really think Isayama sat there and tried to make Eren the perfect shonen protagonist? Do you think Hara tried to sit down there and make Shin the most seinen main character possible? Well, obviously not, because that's just not how it turned out. It all depends how the main character or the characters fit into the story at the end of the day. Shonen, seinen, isekai, it literally doesn't matter as long as the main character fits into the story. Thorfinn in a seinen series fits into it through the lessons he learns, and Luffy fits into the shonen genre, the typical shonen genre, albeit in having his goal and ambition and being inspiring to the younger people watching One Piece. Isekai having a main character who just gets laid for absolutely no reason. That wasn't supposed to be in the video. To be honest, I don't know what this debate is really about at this point. I think it's all settled. I think I settled it all in this video. Nah, I'm just playing. I think it's a cool discussion to have. Friendly debates are always cool in this community, though it's very uncommon that you find a friendly debate. because for the most part they do end up turning into wars between two different fandoms, but I digress. Both demographics are incredible in their own ways. I have many shonen and seinen in my top 10 favorite manga ever. I don't lean favorably towards one. Actually I do. I definitely lean towards seinen more than I lean towards shonen, because to be honest, bro, Berserk and Vagabond are definitely better than any manga